I'm a little under the weather, so it may be punctuated with coughs, and I may try to break off early if it doesn't feel like it's going to go right. All right, we left off at Act 2, Scene 2. And we left off with some pretty fairy poetry. I'll read the fairy poetry and then we'll start bringing other people in it. Titania says, "Come now, a roundel of fairy song. Then for the third part of a minute hence, to kill some cankers in the musk rosebuds, some more with mice for their leathern wings to make my small elves' coats, and some keep back the clamorous owl that nightly hoots and wonders at our quaint spirits. Sing me now asleep, then your offices, and let me rest. First fairy, your spotted snakes with double tongue, thorny hedgehogs, be not seen, newts and blind worms, do no wrong, come not near our fairy queen. Philomel with melody, sing our lullaby, lulla lulla lullaby, lulla lulla lullaby. Never harm, never spell nor charm, come our lovely lady nigh. So good night with lullaby. Weaving spiders, come not here, hence you long-legged spinners, hence. Beetles black, approach not near, worm nor snail, do no offense. Philomel with melody, sing our sweet lullaby, lulla lulla lullaby, lulla lulla lullaby. Never harm, nor spell, nor charm, come our lovely lady nigh, so good night with lullaby." At this point, the fairies leave, and Oberon comes in, and he anoints the eyes of Titania, and he puts out a chant in which he wishes that something repulsive will come along to wake her so that she can fall in love with something repulsive. As he's leaving, Hermia and Lysander enter, and they're lost and tired, and after they make some sweet wooings of each other, they fall asleep. And then Puck enters, and seeing the Athenian garb on Lysander, he thinks this is the man he's looking for, and he anoints his eyes. And so we'll let Paul be Puck because he copped out from reading last time. About line 66. "Through the forest I have gone.
Through the forest I have gone, but Athenian found I none, on whose eyes I might approve this flowering force and stirring love. Night and silence, who is here? Weeds of Athens he doth wear. This is he, my master said, despise the Athenian maid. And hear the maiden sleeping sound on the dank and dirty ground. Pretty soul, she durst not lie near this lack love, this kill courtesy. Curl upon thine eyes I throw, and all the power this charm doth owe. When thou wakest, let love forbid sleep his seat on thy eyelid. So awake when I am gone, for I must now to Oberon."
All right. At this point, Demetrius and Helena come in. Demetrius is looking for the couple to break up their tryst so that he can have Hermia for himself. And Helena is chasing after him, pleading her love, not really realizing her mistake that he wouldn't love her for snitching. Eventually, they're both tired, and Helena drops down to rest, and when she does so, she awakens Lysander, and when he wakes up, he sees her, and he immediately falls in love with her, and he starts proclaiming his love to her. She feels that he's mocking her, and that it is now a matter of her being made fun of. It's not enough for her to have an unrequited love, but that she's mocked at the same time. At this point, Lysander looks at Hermia and is repulsed because his love is now directed toward Helena, and so he leaves following after Helena. At this point, Hermia is all alone, and she wakes up in a nightmare. Would somebody like to read Hermia's Nightmare Awakening along lines 144 to 156? Ela, would you like to be Hermia? No? Betsy, do you want to be Hermia?
Why should you be fucking?
Go ahead.
Help me, Lysander, help me. Do thy best to pluck this fallen serpent from my breast. I me for pity, what a dream was here. Lysander, look how I do quake with fear. Methought a serpent ate my heart away, and you sat smiling at his cruel prey. Lysander, what? Removed? Lysander, Lord, what? Out of hearing, gone? No sound? No word? Alas, where are you? Speak, and if you hear, speak of all love. I swoon almost with fear. No? Then I well perceive you are not mine. Either death or you, I'll find immediately.
Nightmares have nothing to do with female horses. We're talking about nightmares. Mares as female horses. Recently I had a nightmare of the other kind. I had a dream about a mare running toward me. And it set me into doing all sorts of research on it, and I finally came to learn that mare is an Old English word. And it is an Old English word for a succubus. Or for an incubus, I'm sorry. And an incubus is described in Old English lore as something like a satyr with cloven hooves and rather hairy, but with the ability to sexually charm one. The only difference between the English mare and the Greek incubus is that the English mare smells like sulfur. The Greeks also had succubi, or a succubus, which was a female spirit of similar description. And what it was incubi and succubi visited young sleepers with one intent: stealing energy. Awakening from a nightmare, a woman would actually see the incubus sitting on her chest, leaving her breathless. Generally, the breathlessness was not due to the weight on her chest, but from the loss of energy. The drawing of energy off of a person, especially through the breath, is how they did it. It was an etheric breath. This doesn't describe exactly what Hermia has, but her nightmare is very revealing of this same kind of activity. It was common in clairvoyance all the way up to Shakespeare's time. It was commonly known lore that spirits could enter one's body and work through the spine. And when they did so, they appeared as serpents in the spine. The original incubi and succubi were Lucifer spirits, who were the first ones to begin to steal energy from us. So Shakespeare, though not talking exactly about nightmares, is very correct in terms of occult fact. These are beings that did work within the body and they usually worked up the spine and stole as much energy as they could. It's a curious thing that the nightmares smelled like sulfur. Sulfur has always been the Mars negative element. The Mars positive element is iron, which works in the red blood process. But sulfur is associated with the Mars negative, associated with the production of semen and sperm in males. I don't know about vaginal juices and ova in females. But the sulfur is what we need to produce proteins in our bodies. And the Lucifer spirits have always been associated with the rebellious tendencies of Scorpio, the sign of sexual rebellion. But it's a curious thing that even though Scorpio rules serpents and sulfur, the two don't get along well with each other. If you have snakes in your lawn or in your garden, and you want to get rid of them, I don't know why you'd want to do it, because snakes are very beneficial things to have around. All you have to do is get little sulfur pellets and drop them down the holes, and the snakes will disappear. You don't have to use any poisons or anything like that. They don't like sulfur, and they will not stay around it. So the Lucifer spirits were fallen angels who could no longer draw on the energy from the cosmos, and so they had to steal energy and they had to steal experience, and so they did so by stealing it from people. At this point, every one of us begins to wonder, how can I defend myself? Because any one of us is vulnerable to having energy stolen. Actually, defense is the wrong posture. In defense, one has some element of fear, and that fear actually invites being a victim to one kind of entity or another. Most of all, it's young people that are attacked by incubi or succubi or nightmares for two reasons. Young people have an abundance of energy and a lack of passional control. And when one has a lack of passional control and gets angry or has outbursts of sexual passion that are uncontrollable, that opens the aura, and such beings can come in and draw the energy out. So, all one has to do is be loving without being lustful, and being positive and working on the evolutionary work, and one doesn't have to worry about defense. Since the serpents do represent sexual lust, the symbol here that Shakespeare is using in the dream of Hermia or Hermia is not exclusively the symbol of treachery, as one would think when there's awakening. It is also an indication that the thoughts of the young lovers are not purely platonic love, that there had to have been that element of sexuality there for her to be open anyway. All right. I'll get my second wind here pretty soon. Act 3 opens up in the wood where Titania is sleeping. The rude mechanicals are, they come in to where she's sleeping in the grove under the oak, and Quince says this is a suitable location, and they start rehearsing their play. At every juncture, Bottom has something to say. Larry, would you like to be Bottom, beginning around line 9? Oh, where it says, there are things in this comedy.
There are things in this comedy of Pyramus and Thisbe that will never please. First, Pyramus must draw us
And they come up with the notion that they have to leave all of the killing out. And then Bottom says, continue on with not a whit.
Not a whit. I have a device to make all well. Write me a prologue, and let the prologue seem to say, we will do no harm with our sword. And that Pyramus is not killed indeed. For the more better assurance, tell them that I, Pyramus, am not Pyramus, but Bottom the Weaver, and this will put them out of fear.
Why don't you go on to the next two right away?
I'll make it two more. Let it be written in 8 and 8.
I was thinking of the two long ones. I'm sorry. Masters and Nay.
Well, masters, you have to consider with yourselves to bring in, God shield us, a lion among the ladies. It's a most dreadful thing. For there is not a more fearful wild fowl than your lion living. And we ought to look to it. Nay, you must name his name, and half his face must be seen through the lion's neck. And he himself must speak through, saying thus, or to the same defect, ladies, or fair ladies, I would wish you, or I would request you, or I would entreat you not to fear, not to tremble, my life for yours. If you think I come hither as a lion, it were pity of my life. No, I am no such thing. I am a man as other men are. And there indeed, let him name his name, and tell them plainly he is snug the joiner.
There's another one further on down where it's some man or other.
Okay. Some man or other must represent wall, and let him have some plaster or loam or some rough cast about him to signify wall. And let him hold his fingers thus, and through that cranny shall Pyramus and Thisbe whisper.
Shakespeare is obviously having a good time here. He's making sport of several things at the same time. Most obviously, he is poking fun at a practice that he disdained and eschewed, even though people of his time didn't always like what he did. And that is the practice of tempering or diluting art so it is more agreeable and so it is more likely to be acceptable. On one hand, Shakespeare doesn't play up a lot of sex or a lot of violence, and he doesn't live by them in the plays, but he didn't stint on them either. He knew the appropriate place for them, especially violence. He showed it for what it was, and he showed what comes of it. See, he realized especially that all of the feelings, especially the feelings of great fear or great anger or great passion, are better understood if the person imagines them. He was not one for elaborate sets or properties such as the people here are trying to do. He wanted people to have imaginative experience, because that way they would be putting things together in their own consciousness, and the effect would be much, much more powerful. It's the purpose of art to uplift things. It isn't just a matter of materials or properties or even actions. Art is like a distillation of life in such a way that one can see it and live it more deeply from day to day after the artistic experience. If we have only properties or activities, it becomes something like a mere amusement or an entertainment or a recreation, and it isn't an experience that edifies. For art to work, especially something like a play, it has to be challenging and edifying. If, in fact, the action or the properties predominate, immediately all power is lost, and the form of entertainment becomes escapist, and it's flattering and pandering to the audience so that they become lazy. And we see this happening a lot progressively in the American cinema. More and more movies are based on special effects and wild chases and all kinds of action, but nothing to challenge the consciousness of the viewer. Shakespeare also knew that if he had only edifying content and deep material, he would also lose the crowd. So what he did is he used a big tent approach. He had some light, entertaining material, and he juxtaposed it with deep and challenging material. He knew that if he could get things past the resistance of the lower consciousness or the lower nature, that it would work on people. So what he was trying to do was actually as much of a spiritual process as it was a philosophical process. Almost all mystics realize that one of the most ennobling things one can do for all parties is to have an interaction. And in that interaction, to respect the divinity, the divine capacity in each person. And Shakespeare did that. He absolutely abhorred watering things down or putting things in simple language or something like that. He wanted to present full spectrum, big tent presentations, and it had to be something where all of life could be appreciated, or there wouldn't be anything in it for him. It takes nothing to write a simple piece that has nothing to it for but simple-minded entertainment or excitement. In our spiritual lives, we find a lot of paradox. It seems as if simultaneously we can do both more and less than we think we can. Being attached to our personalities and having it thrown on our face every day that we are inadequate and imperfect and in many ways morally flawed, we sometimes sell ourselves short. And we don't know what we're capable of spiritually. And it's almost like when Christ Jesus says, I would have done greater miracles if it weren't for your unbelief. For a lot of people, especially aspiring people like ourselves, there are great things we could do if we didn't continuously sell ourselves short. If we didn't make it such that we feel that we can't do anything. The other side of the paradox is that we often think we can do more than we really can. The concrete mind is in the service and control of the lower nature much too often. And this results in something like when the lower nature cuts itself off from the divine being and arrogates power to itself, it weakens itself. And when it is weakened, it is vulnerable. And it tries to overcome that weakness and vulnerability with a false bravado. And so we sometimes state and think we can do much more than we really can, at least at our level of skill. Shakespeare does this quite frequently. He shows this propensity in human nature in his clown characters and when there are plays within a play. Again, both of these circumstances, the fact that these are just clowns or the fact that you're looking at something with a twice removed vantage point, allows things to slip by the Argus-eyed lower nature, where again the suggestion can take root inside of us, and as long as we're thinking that we're superior than these, we are superior to these rude mechanicals or these funny clowns, then we can laugh at it. And as long as we're removed so that we're looking at a play within a play, we don't really take it that this is making fun of us. Once the seed is planted in our consciousness, it's going to bear fruit. And this is a means that we're accepting it. We're looking at the play, we're taking it in, we're interacting with the play. So it isn't like somebody bombarding us with subliminal clauses or subliminal suggestions. This is all very ethical and it's very fair. There are other approaches that try to do the same thing, and they're much less effective. Morality plays, for example, try to melodramatically show how bad we are, and and it cloys a person. A person doesn't want to go, and they don't want to hear that stuff. So Shakespeare is making fun both of the whole idea of watering things down, and he is making fun through his clown characters of the same thing that is in us. We're all braggarts, and we all tell ourselves, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and we don't do it. Do you know that there actually are versions of Shakespeare that are watered down? I forget the name. Do you know the name of them, Larry? Where they put it in simple English, and they take out all of the deeper meanings, and they take out all the violence, and they take out all of the sex. And I can't imagine who would, they think that the action and the properties are going to carry it all. It's, it's almost like modern translations of the Bible, especially the New Testament. They're not only translations, they're interpretations, but they're really easy to read and they're easy to understand. But the reality that was originally pointed to in those books is not easy to understand, and it isn't always easy to read. All right. In the middle of all of this, Puck comes in, and Puck must have something to say here. Yes. It begins around line 78. What hempen?
I don't have lines either.
Oh, what
hempen homespuns have we swaggering here, so near the cradle of the fairy queen? What, a play toward? I'll be an auditor, an actor too, perhaps, if I see cause.
All right, Pyramus, who is bottom? Odors?
Odors, savors, sweet. So that thy breath, thy dearest Thisbe dear, love heart, voice, stay thou but here a while, and by I will thee to appear.
So
stranger Pyramus than e'er played here.
So at At this point, both Bottom, as Thisbe, and Puck exit. And the Thisbe has some cute lines. She says, "Most radiant Pyramus, most lily white of hue, of color like the red rose on triumphant briar, most brisky juvenile, and eke most lovely Jew, as true the truest horse that yet never tire, I'll meet thee, Pyramus, at Ninny's tomb," instead of Ninnis' tomb. At this point, Bottom brings Puck back in, but only Puck brings Bottom back in, only has an ass's head on him, and all of the guys run out, and Puck says, "I'll follow."
"I'll follow you. I'll lead you around. I'll lead you about around. Through bog, through bush, through brake, through briar. Sometimes a horse I'll be, sometime a hound. A hog, a headless bear, sometime a fire. And neigh and bark and grunt and roar and burn like horse, hound, hog, bear, fire at every turn."
All right. Bottom is one.
That was Puck.
Yeah, it was Puck, but that's all right. We can read the Bottom right next.
Okay, why did they run away? This is a knavery of them to make me afeard.
Snout comes in and says, "O Bottom, thou art changed. What do I see on thee?"
What do you see? You see an ass head of your own, don't you?
"Bless thee, Bottom, bless thee. Thou art translated."
I see their knavery. This is to make an ass of me, to frighten me, if they could. Yeah, but I will not stir from this place, do what they can. I will walk up and down here, and I will sing that they shall hear. I am not afraid.
Stop at that point. All right. The madcap has gone up a notch now, and all sorts of things are happening. In A Winter's Tale, we noted how Leontes, in his pathological jealousy, projected his own motives onto others. In this play, we see that same phenomenon of projection in a different way and in a different process, even carried as far as clairvoyance. Bottom does not wish to accept or even admit to his asinine nature, which is now made manifest by the ass's head, tells the others they are projecting, which is just like a little kid saying it takes one to know one. While he is wrong in this instant, he could very well be right in just as many other instances. There is an old occult maxim that says you are always looking through your own aura, and the snakes that you see in the aura of someone else may be within your own. Clairvoyance is very much a psychological activity. And it is not just a perception. It's not just like a matter of you can wash your eyeglasses clean and see things more clearly. You have to look through your own psychology. When you're looking through your own psychology, the clairvoyance is not a pure perception. It is psychological. And you do, in fact, see your own psychology in others. This means that in order to become clairvoyant and for it to be useful at all in anything but totally confusing, you have to know yourself so well that you know what is you and what isn't you. And you have to purify your own motivations, because otherwise what's likely to happen is you're just going to project yourself onto somebody else, and you're going to be seeing in them what is really taking place in yourself. It's extremely important that the psychological work and especially the moral work of purification be done before we work on the sensitivity and the technical parts of clairvoyance. Those are relatively easy for someone who has self-control and someone that has pure motivation. Clairvoyance can be brought about quite, with alacrity. But to have someone of character and to have someone of purity of intent is not an easy thing to find. All right, let's continue on from there, where he starts singing. Who's Larry? Your bottom, the woozle cock.
The woozle cock, so black of you, with taut orange tawny bill, the throstle is not so true, the wren with little quill.
Tinny, you want to be Titani? Tinny, Titani? Oh!
What angel wakes me from my flowery bed?
The finch, the sparrow, and the lark, the plain song cuckoo gray, whose note full many a man doth mark, and dares not answer nay.
Just keep right.
For indeed, who would set his wit to so foolish a bird? Who would give a bird the lie, though he cry cuckoo never so?
I pray thee, gentle mortal, sing again. Mine ear is much enamored of thy note. So is mine eye enthralled to thy shape, and thy fair virtues force perforce doth move me on the first view to swear I love thee.
Methinks, mistress, you should have little reason for that, and yet, to say the truth, reason and love doth keep little company together nowadays. The more the pity that some honest neighbors will not make them friends. Nay, I can bleat upon occasion.
Thou art as wise as thou art beautiful.
Not so old neither, but if I have wit enough to get out of this wood, I have enough to serve mine own turn.
Out of this wood do not desire to go. Thou shalt remain here, whether thou wilt or no. I am a spirit of no common rate. The summer still doth tend upon my state, and I do love thee. Therefore, go with me. I'll give thee fairies to attend on thee, and they shall fetch thee jewels from the deep, and sing while thou on blessed flowers dost sleep. And I will purge thy mortal grossness so that thou shalt like an airy spirit go. Peace blossom, cobweb, moth, and mustard seed.
Just skip right to the next one.
Be kind and courteous to this gentleman. Hop in his walks and gambol in his eyes. Feed him with apricots and dewberries, with purple grapes, green figs, and mulberries. The honey bags steal from the humble bees, and for night tapers crop their waxen thighs, and light them at the fiery glowworm's eyes. To have my love to bed and to arise, and pluck the wings from painted butterflies, to fan the moonbeams from his sleeping eyes, nod to him, elves, and do him courtesies.
Why don't we skip down to the next one by bottom, and I cry your worships.
Oh, I cry your worship's mercy, heartily. I beseech your worship's name.
Cobweb.
I shall desire you of more acquaintance, good Master Cobweb. If I cut my finger, I shall make bold with you. Your name, honest gentleman.
Peas blossom.
I pray you, commend me to Mistress Squash, your mother, and to Master Peascod, your father. Good Master Pleaseblossom, I shall desire you of more acquaintance too. Your name, I beseech you, sir?
Mustard seed.
Good Master Mustard Seed, I know your patience well. That same cowardly giant-like ox beef hath devoured many a gentleman of your house. I promise you your kindred hath made my eyes water ere now. I desire your more acquaintance, good Master Mustard Seed.
Come wait upon me, lead him to my bower. The moon, methinks, looks with a watery eye, and when she weeps every little flower, lamenting some enforced chastity. Tie up my lover's tongue, bring him silently.
All right. We won't have much to say right now. We'll skip right to the next scene, which takes place in another part of the wood. And Puck is reporting to Oberon. Oberon says, I wonder if Titania be awake, then what it is that next came in her eye, which she must dote on in extremity. Here comes my messenger. How now, mad spirit? What night rule now about this haunted grove?
My mistress with a monster is in love. Near to her close and consecrated bower, where she was in her dull and sleeping hour, a crew of patches, crude mechanicals, that worked for bread upon Athenian stalls, were met together to rehearse a play, intended for great Theseus' nuptial day. And shallowest thick skin of that barren sort, who Pyramus presented in their sport, forsook his scene and entered in a break. Then I did him at this advantage take, and asses now lie fixed upon his head. Anon his Thisbe must be answered, and forth my mimic comes. When they him spy, a wild geese, that the creeping fowler eye, or russet painted coughs, many in sort, rising and crawling at that gun's report, seven themselves, and madly swept the sky, so at his sight away his fellows fly. And at our stamp, ere o'er and o'er one falls, his murder cries, and help from Athens calls. Their sense doth weak, lost with their fears thus strong, mad senseless things begin to do them wrong. For briars and thorns at their apparel snatch, some sleeves, some hats, from yields all things catch. I led them on in this distracted fear, and left sweet Pyramus translated there. Then, when in that moment so it came to pass, Titania waked, and straightway loved and asked.
Oberon is pleased and says, This is far better than I could devise, but hast thou watched the Athenians' eyes with love juice, as I did bid thee do?
I took him sleeping, that is finished too, and the Athenian woman by his side, that when he waked or forced she must be eyed.
At this moment, Hermia comes in, looking for Lysander in panic. Demetrius has found her, and he's hounding her, and he's getting nowhere. She leaves, and Demetrius falls asleep in exasperation. Oberon sees that Puck has made a mistake and anointed the wrong eyes. And so he says, along around lines 88, What hast thou done? Thou hast mistaken quite, and laid the love juice on some true love's sight. Of thy misprison must perforce ensue some true love turned, and not a false turned true. Jesus, lovely poetry all the way through, especially that statement by Titania before. You didn't get cheated that time, did you? Yeah. He commands Puck to go and get Helena. And when he is gone, Oberon anoints the eyes of Demetrius. Puck returns not only with Helena, but he returns with both Helena and Lysander. And Lysander is pursuing Helena now, and he knows there's going to be more fun in store. So along lines 110, Puck says, Captain
of our fairy band, Helena is here at hand, and the youth mistook by me, pleading for a lover's fee. Shall we their fond pageants see? Lord, what fools these mortals be.
Stand aside, the noise they make will cause Demetrius to wake.
Then will two at once woo one, that must needs be sport alone, and those things do best please me that befall preposterously.
What happens is that Demetrius is awakened, and by the argument, and when he sees Helena with his eyes now anointed, he falls in love with her. So now both Lysander and Demetrius are in love with Helena, and he tries to woo her. Helena now believes they're both mocking her. You want to be Helena? Along around line 145. Oh, spite. At this point, Hermia enters and asks Lysander why he abandoned her, and he says, love made him do it. It's always the answer, love made me do it. And they argue, and Lysander tells her he hates her, and he loves Helena. And things are in very, very bad stead. And Helena feels powerless and thinks they are all in a conspiracy, and she berates Hermia. You want to read the line along 192, it is. Begins with, lo, she is. Yes. Well, she is one of this confederacy. Oh, okay. Beautiful poetry, especially I love that line. The two is one cherry. You get the picture just right away, growing out of one thing. Julius Caesar held a lot of temporal power, and he was self-empowered. And he didn't suspect the conspiracy against him. He didn't even seem to believe that there was a conspiracy when he was warned in many ways. Helena feels completely helpless and suspects conspiracy where there is none. Now, there is a principle here. If one is confident and self-empowered, one is more likely to be trusting. If one is overconfident, one will not believe almost any evidence against them or anything threatening them. On the other hand, if one feels helpless and disempowered, no matter what the cause, one is likely to be suspicious and project conspiracies even if there are not real ones there. This is the psychology of conspiracy or false conspiracy, or how it is perceived. It's not the case that we know in Helena. She's merely disempowered. It isn't a matter of her having given up her responsibility to take care of herself. She hasn't let things get out of hand. Some people do abrogate that responsibility and do not take care of themselves, and then when things get out of hand, rather than suspecting themselves as the culprit for their circumstances, they lie to themselves and say it must be someone else. And the more one is disempowered and the more one has given up self-control, the more grandiose the projections of conspiracy in order to maintain some kind of false self-worth. This proceeds all the way to psychosis. If you look at paranoids who are psychotically projective of conspiracies against them, they are all people who feel that they really are worthless, that they have nothing to offer. They will even strike out and try to destroy members of a false conspiracy who they feel are responsible for their situation. The spirit, being divine, has a natural dignity. It respects itself. There's a divine self-respect in the royal nature of spirit. When this divinity is reflected, this divinity of the true self is reflected into the lower nature, and it is perverted, as we have perverted it into some kind of pseudo-self. This pseudo-self expresses itself, instead of with self-dignity, it does so with great pride, because it has closed itself off from healing and strengthening spiritual input in order to maintain its own little fiefdom. It becomes more weakened, because only the true flow of grace that comes from the Spirit can heal and strengthen and build our character. So what happens is the weaker and weaker it becomes, the more it builds this vain, fanatic pride and tries to draw energy from the world around it. It can be successful, but it is living in a false kind of weakness. On the other hand, if we do just simple good things and slowly develop the self-control and surrender ourselves to what is divine within us, with an attitude both of humility and reverence, the second self can gradually be tamed. And in such a case, it can come to a dignity all of its own. So Helena's case is not the perfect case of a paranoid, but it does show that when one is weakened, that weakness, or one is disempowered, that this can automatically lead to a false conspiracy. The more unlikely a person is to accept the responsibility, the more distant the conspiracy becomes. So that people who feel really insignificant may feel more strongly attached to the conspiracy of the death of John Kennedy. And because it's someone who doesn't want to face self at all. Eventually, the masculine assertiveness expresses itself, and the feminine gentleness shines through, at least for Hermia for a little bit, and she makes peace with Helena. However, the gentleness doesn't last, and soon the men are insulting and challenging each other, and the women are fighting each other with words, and everything escalates until the men leave to go into the woods to fight with each other for the right to the hand of Helena. The women also leave, but they are not trusting each other, and both of them are amazed, but each is amazed in a different way. When they have left, Oberon reproves Puck for his errors and his knaveries, whichever they may be. And what does he say? He says, he jumped quite a ways here. He says, "This is thy negligence. Still thou makest or else committest thy knaveries willfully." And Puck says, "Believe me, kid. Believe me."
Speaking of shadows, I mistook. Did you not tell me I should know the man by a Athenian garment he had on? And so far blameless proves my enterprise, that I am anointed in Athenian's eyes. And so far I am glad I did it. And so far am I glad it so did sort, that their jangling I esteem a sport.
So he made a mistake, but he enjoyed the mistake. This is that fairy consciousness. It's really innocent. It can make a mistake and not take it personally to heart. Oberon then commands, "Thou seest these lovers seek a place to fight. Hie thee, Robin, overcast the night, the starry welkin, cover thou anon with drooping fog as black as Archeron, and lead these testy rivals so astray as one come not within the other's way. Like the Lysander sometime framed thy tongue, then stirred Demetrius with bitter wrong. And sometimes rail thou like Demetrius, and from each other look thou lead them thus, till o'er their brows death counterfeiting sleep, with leaden legs and batty wings doth creep. Then crush this herb into Lysander's eye, whose liquor hath the virtuous property to take from thence all air with his might, and make his eyeballs roll with wanton sight. When they next awake, all this derision shall seem a dream and fruitless vision, and back to Athens shall the lovers wend, with league whose date till death shall never end. Whiles I in this affair do thee employ, I'll to my queen and beg her India boy, and then I will her charmed eye release from monsters' view, and all things shall be peace. And so Puck does so. Puck says, we have one more little part in here. Puck says we have to hurry. My lord,
Lord, this must be done with haste, for the night's sweet dragons cut the clouds full fast, and yonder shines Aurora's harbinger, and whose approach goes wandering here and there, troop home to churchyards, and spirits old, and in crossways and floods of burial. Already to their wormy beds are gone, for fear lest they should look their shames upon. They willfully themselves exit from life, and must for I consort with black-browed night.
but we are spirits of another sort. I with the morning's love have oft made sport, and like a forester the groves may tread, even till the eastern gate, all fiery red, opening on Neptune with fair blessed dreams, turns into yellow gold in salt green streams. But, notwithstanding, haste, make no delay, we may effect this business yet ere day.
Up and down, I will lead them up and down. I am feared and feared, I am feared,
Shakespeare is stating very accurate occult knowledge in these passages, especially the passage by Oberon. We mentioned when we talked about Julius Caesar that the night ethers are less active because they are excited and their energy level is raised when light passes through them. For this reason, if there is going to be a manifestation of etheric energy, it's much easier for an entity from the inner world to be able to do that in the nighttime than in the daytime. This is all accomplished through the agency of the light ether. And the light ether is the third ether above the chemical and the life ethers. It corresponds to our third body. That is, it is above the physical and it is above the etheric. It is the desire body. And the function of the desire body is to motivate things and to move things. And this property then is carried into the light ether, which does the moving or acting in the light ether in our body. We've seen it when we've talked about one of our main themes, the theme of the cycle of Persephone, that when the sun sinks below the equator and the angle of the light strikes the earth at a shallower angle, what happens is the ethers, no longer driven by the light ether, withdraw within the world, within the earth itself. And the light ether provokes heat. And in general, the atmosphere is less warm. In spring, the opposite happens. When the sun's angle begins to rise again, the light ether strikes in such a way that it can activate both the ethers and the atmosphere is warmed. In our bodies, the blood is warmed and driven by the light ether. And the more rich we are in light ether, the more we can activate ourselves and drive the blood to different parts of the body, especially the brain, to get at certain kinds of consciousness that are not always available to us. The same thing happens with night and day. At night, there is not a direct ingress of light ether being emanated from the sun. For that reason, the atmosphere is dark, and ghouls and ghosts of the dead and other beings that are associated with death and decay that cannot regenerate life and energy directly from the sun, they shepherd what little bit of energy that they have, and it is easy for them to manifest in the dark and in the night. It isn't a matter of shame, as the poetry says here. It is a matter of the nature of the energy itself that spirits can be manifest or not. Fairies, however, are indeed, as Oberon says, spirits of another sort. They are part of the building process of nature, and they work right within the active creative building forces. However, when they are so manifest in the daytime, all of the transpiration of plants, for example, has to be done in the daytime when there is sunlight there. They do not take the form as readily as they do at night or in the evening or right before dawn. They become more like bursts of energy and less having fairy-like or elf-like forms. And so the fairies can manifest in the daytime, but they are not likely to be seen in the same way. From people who do see fairies, they tell me that the very best time to see them is right after sunset, when there is still that side light from the earth, and the earth begins, all the plant kingdom begins exhaling all of its etheric vapors in the sense that bring the nocturnal animals out. At that time is the easiest time to see fairies. I've had several friends see them at that time of day, and it's really a remarkable thing. So Oberon is stating a truth. Probably the daytime form of fairies, the closest thing in our vision that would approach that shape would be something like a tongue of flame, a rapidly changing shape that is a body of energy. So Puck does all of these mimicries of Demetrius and Lysander through the end of the act, and he ends up with some lovely poetry. On the ground. That's right.
On the ground, sweet sound, I'll fly to your eye, gentle look a remedy. When thou wakest, thou takest true delight in the sight of thy former lady's eye, and the country proverb known, that every man should take his own, and in your waking shall be shown, that shall have Jill, naught shall go ill. The man shall have his married then, and all shall be well.
There are two little topics I'd like to talk about. This is as far as we're going in the play tonight. One we introduced briefly last time, and we'll carry it on a little further this time. And the other is a new one. Let's talk about the new one first. The first phenomenon I would like to talk about is compound and converse in its nature. And it is a problem of altered states of consciousness. Whether those states of consciousness are raised or lowered or neither is not the matter. If we look at the character of Lysander and Demetrius, neither gives any indication of any self-conscious knowledge of being under a spell. They're acting as normal men will act, which is not much of a commentary on normal men. And if you look at it, Bottom doesn't recognize either that he's under a spell, even when others point it out, and even as we're going to see when he develops a taste for oats. He still doesn't know, even when he notes that he has a hairy face, he still doesn't realize that he's under a spell. Now this is in part due to the subtlety of the phenomenon. Most of what is called magic is carried out through control of or manipulation of the ethers. A good deal of what is called magic is accomplished through suggestions put through the ethers, sometimes bombarded right onto the edge of someone's aura. If you can see the periphery of someone's even etheric aura and think thoughts while consciously observing it, they will come in as though the person thought it themselves. Suggestion is the basis of all hypnosis. But suggestion does not have to be carried out so far as a full trance where there's a partial disembodiment of the etheric head being driven out by hammering suggestions and replaced by the hypnotist. It doesn't have to go that far. A good deal of suggestive and semi-hypnotic activity is much less dramatic. Like Bottom or Lysander or Demetrius, all of us can be in fairly normal states of consciousness and still be under significant suggestive influence. I have experienced it. I've been in a semi-trance-like state, and I suspect everyone else has been in that kind of a state. In our entire consciousness, we have things going on at various levels of being, and we're not aware of them, and we have some projectiles of thought that pass through all the levels of consciousness, and we're affected by them, but some we don't really understand. The origin of input into what we consider our waking consciousness is open. Unless we are hermetically sealed, all psychological processes and spiritual processes were symbolized by the alchemists as different activities in the production of gold. Hermetic sealing represented a kind of consciousness where one could place oneself within one's own aura, impenetrable to any suggestion from anything from without. In such a state, one depended on intuition from the divine, from the spiritual part within, and it didn't need anything but its spiritual muse. Most of the time, because we are perceiving and because we are lax in maintaining the integrity of our consciousness, we let our consciousness drift, and as a result, subtle forces can enter into our consciousness without us even knowing it. We've all experienced things where we have, states where we have suggestive influence going on in multiple within us. Probably the best is when we are in a dream, right before waking. In that dream, we recognize ourselves as the watcher of the dream, but we also recognize ourselves as different parts within the dream. So a lot of things can be working within us, and it requires greater and greater awareness because a lot of things are subtle. Ignorance is no excuse for breaking the law. Subtlety, on the other hand, is no excuse for a lack of awareness. That's the other side of the same phenomenon. It may be subtle what is happening to Lysander, Demetrius in Bottom, but that doesn't excuse the fact that they have not been paying attention. All of them are not sufficiently awake. Until we are completely awake and aware and in control and intimate with our own kingdom of consciousness, we're unable to determine mischief coming from either within or without. As we've seen, the lower nature in us makes its own mischief, and we don't even know where it comes from. And this should be something that I think I should talk about in every talk, if just to repeat it. This is why it is so important to become increasingly awake, to be more and more aware, because otherwise we're vulnerable, and otherwise our whole consciousness is capable of pollution. not only do we need to become awake and aware, we have to develop all the things that we become awake and aware of, and we have to learn to use them in creative function. In short, we have a very long way to go. Shakespeare also makes another subtle point in this regard. It's like he's trying to make the point that magic isn't something special, that it isn't something unnatural or something extra psychological. The stuff of magic is of the same stuff as is within us. This we can see right in the play, because if we look at the two women versus the two men, the two women who have not been affected by magic are acting just as outrageously as the two men who have been affected by magic. All of their behavior is outrageous. So this should make it pretty clear to us that magic or any other intrusion into our inner sanctity, into our private inner being, is not something that's alien or foreign. This is the sign, again, of almost psychotic behavior to say that there is something extra-human or like a foreign implant that has been put into our body to describe or to explain activities that are really originating within our own psychological agency. We have to realize that it isn't going to be something very different. Again, in all spiritual things, subtlety is key. We have to become more aware to greater subtlety within our own being and the origins of different things that direct our lives. Now let's quickly glance at the other topic that is a continuation from last time. It is obvious that this is a very strange way for people to fall in love and to treat each other when they have fallen in love. And from the play and from lives around us, we should see that falling in love is quite a varied phenomenon. And a lot of the varieties of falling in love do not appear to be healthy. So I would like to take a look at some of the varieties of falling in love. I don't mean loving people, but I mean of falling in love. This could include falling into lust. And even though that is a topic that's worth studying, we have little time for it, and it would be too far off topic. So I won't try to address that. One of the first times in life that I haven't addressed myself to lust. With lust, there are so many things like instincts and chemistry and all sorts of other things that come in that are quite a good deal to deal with. In several of the varieties of falling in love, there is always an unconscious or subconscious element. And it is that unconscious or subconscious element that is behind the feeling of suddenly falling in love, rather than just growing in love, which is a very slow, wonderful process. The simplest kind, or the most primitive kind of falling in love that I've noted, has to do with an unconsciousness that often remains in a relationship long after the onset of falling in love. This kind of falling in love happens most with young people and people who are pretty unconscious of factors working inside of them. Our general self-consciousness is not very awake right now. There are many things we are unaware of. And because the general self-consciousness is so dim, we cannot consciously sustain simultaneous activities. We have to specialize, or we have to do things in sequence, because we can't do everything at once. Sometimes, in our deep concentration, when we break through the meditation, we are conscious of many things happening in us on many levels all at the same time. But most of the time, we're not Leonardo da Vinci's. And so what we do is we leave some things latent in us. But even though they're latent in us, they are important to our whole being. The spirit is a whole and always tries to do things in wholes, and it strives to express wholeness in everything we do. So even the latencies are necessary to wholeness, or are necessary to be brought into wholeness. Even the simplest latency, gender differentiation. Some of us are reborn as men and some of us are reborn as women. Even that produces a latency, and the spirit feels that as a need. I have a friend that has been married several times and has had many relationships, and he said to me, if I don't have a woman, I feel like half a man. This is a perfect expression of not having total general consciousness, but having a latency expressed as a need. Beyond the simple differentiations into men and women, there are specific differentiations and specific latencies and unfulfillments. We each have, you might say, a profile between the conscious and the unconscious parts of our being, a profile of latency. Or, suppose we meet somebody who has a counter profile where their awakeness and their strengths perfectly match our latencies. Or suppose they have a special strength that matches an especially deep latency or unconsciousness in us. This is what results in a primitive kind of falling in love. We don't know why, but for some reason we are attracted to this person and we feel fulfilled around this person even if we don't know why. There's an instant like falling in love. Sometimes people around such a couple are surprised. Matchmakers always try to make matches in how you're similar or with common interests you have. Those things are nice, but they don't satisfy latencies. The latencies are hidden things, and what one person finds and needs and sees in another is not a really obvious thing. Sometimes a person even needs conflict. It's really very, very painful. And sometimes conflict ensues when matching latencies meet. Rudolf Steiner states a principle very excellently. It goes something like, if we satisfy our needs from without, we don't develop from within. If we have to take drugs to alter our inner consciousness, we don't develop the ability to do that in ourselves. If we take in heavy molecules like fats from without, instead of synthesizing our own fats from simple sugars, we develop something in our consciousness of a laziness, because the Spirit puts a great deal of energy into synthesizing fats out of simple sugars. So if we need a cup of tea to make us sociable, there's something wrong. Similarly, if we fall in love in this way, and we allow our partners to satisfy our latencies, we don't develop spiritually. We don't become on our own. The Spirit will not allow that. It's all right to fall in love and to allow a partner to become something like a Virgil to lead us into the underworld, where we can discover our latencies and through the eyes of that mentor have it take and grow and become like others. That's I think, a valid way of utilizing this kind of falling in love, which is pretty common. The second kind of falling in love we talked about last time. It occurs when we have an idea of ourselves, what Shakespeare would say, a conceit, an image of ourselves. And that this conceit is artificial or affected. This conceit we often don't recognize either. It's also in that background of latencies, even if we consciously develop it. I can remember at a certain time in young life taking on all kinds of affectations only to have them become part of me. These latencies that are false conceits also desire or need satisfaction. And their needs usually come in the form, in vanity, of seeking glamour. And this kind of loving the idea of someone because it fits the idea of ourself often results in addictive behavior. Anytime we try to satisfy a false need or to satisfy a need falsely, it results in addictive behavior. There is again an analogy with alimentation. We may intellectually like the idea of a diet or a food regimen, but that idea may not match with our real nutritional needs. And no matter how much we may try to stick by it, it will not do us any good, because the real needs are real needs. And that false notion that we have will result in food addictions that are false. Sometimes this idea of a lover for us, or this conceit of a lover for ourselves, happens before somebody comes along, and sometimes it happens after somebody comes along. In any case, we love the person because there's something glamorous. In fact, we even build such a person up and we pedestalize such a person because we feel that we'll be all the greater when we win them. It's all false, and it's all likely to lead to sad disappointments. Sometimes this kind of love actually persists, or the relationship persists. Because some people are willing to live with a pretense, or some people are willing to live in saving the appearances and not really live in love. In both of these varieties of falling in love, the unconscious element is usually very strong and is predominant. A third kind of falling in love is a bit more lofty and more self-conscious. It's based on the folk statement, marriages are made in heaven. It also has to do with mutual development of character over numerous rebirths. Families look alike and act alike for more than genetic reasons. We become like what we love. And unless we are hermits for several lives in succession, we build our character not in a vacuum, but with other people. Incidentally, it's interesting to note that hermits do have simplistic personalities. They have simplistic personalities because all the essentials are cut away, unessentials are cut away, and even some of the essentials, because for this one simple kind of thing. We build our personalities and our creations with others, with fairies, with divine beings, but with each other mostly. Thus, if we have developed if we find individuals who do have very clear-cut, very standout characteristics, and that have very ramified personalities, this is not something that happened alone. Especially if those personalities are involved in some kind of creative work, like Rogers and Hart, or somebody like that, where you work together in a tandem. So this variety of falling in love has to do with having built a character together with someone else slowly over many lives, and in the process each has developed something very special that could only be developed with that other person. The most extreme and obvious case of this is sadomasochism. Somebody isn't suddenly a vicious sadist, or somebody isn't a helpless masochist. It takes a long time to become that way. And so sadomasochistic relationships are the least likely to be accidental, because they have developed with each other side by side. What may have begun as an affectionate love pinch may take a very strong kind of perverse direction, and over many lives have developed into something completely out of control. Obviously, when you meet this person, this is not so unconscious. Not like saying, I need this person because they have something I don't have, which you might be saying to yourself unconsciously. Or it's not like saying that this is my dream person that fits my dream of myself, rather than accepting. This is, I am this way, and I have finally met the person with whom I became this way. And this kind of falling in love is well prepared for in previous lives, and certainly is prepared for in the inner worlds before one comes back to birth. So marriages are made in heaven in this kind of way. There's yet one other kind of falling in love that is very, very lofty And it is the kind of thing that some people would call soulmates. But unfortunately, what most people call soulmates is like the second kind. It's all that glamour and vanity and everything else, and it isn't really something like soulmates. This kind of falling in love could be called free love, but not what is normally meant by the term of free love, which represents an unabashed promiscuity. The more we grow and the more we develop and become divine creative beings, the more we come to know ourselves. And when we can see and recognize the divinity that works within our being, the more we can see the divinity in others. This kind of apperception of divinity is a form of intuition. And sometimes it happens that we discover someone in the same way we discover a spiritual truth. There is a sudden Iranian-like intuition, and you see this individual, and you know the truth of this individual, and there is a character of altruism about it. If this is mutual, it is unlike the concept of soulmates. The concept that soulmates have is that we have to be together. We have no choice about it. It's divine destiny for us to be together. This is free. If you are operating from your own divinity, in that divinity you are free to do what you want to do. And you can then commit to someone, even though the discovery of someone may be very sudden and be a full-fledged intuitive experience. You choose freely and voluntarily to work with them and to work creatively with them. And this, I think, works throughout the cosmos. Because if you look at it, there are as many binary star systems as there are unary star systems. And somewhere, some way down the line, beings that are now the divinities of stars have been and worked with each other in freedom, and this is carried over millions and millions of years. There is intimacy, probably as much intimacy as there is in the almost, how would you call it, instinctual intimacy or promiscuity of the lower types of falling in love. But it is intimacy without having to surrender personally. You don't have to surrender if you're giving everything freely. And if there is a commitment, let your yeas be yeas and your nays be nays, and you perpetually give to each other in love, everything is there. There may be other forms of falling in love, and all of these forms, except the first and the last, probably don't overlap. But in our relations with others, it may be a mingling or a commingling of all of these things. It's almost certain that somebody that we meet that is that important in our life, that we have a lifelong or at least a long, intense interaction, that this is not by accident. And it isn't just by compatibilities, but because we have been working together before. So there is an element of everything in most of these forms of falling in love. All right, I think we said enough about falling in love. We're going to have 2 more meetings to cover the last 2 acts. We'll still meet every other week. And we have 2 themes, a major and a minor theme. We'll probably take the minor theme, which will be the discussion of the Eleusinian mysteries, with the end of Act 3, and then we'll take our major theme for the cycle with the last meeting. I'm sorry, I'm just not in shape. It just happens. Any questions? Any comments? Any more poetry of any kind?
Well, it wouldn't only be falling in love. Wouldn't it be within families also?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's a given, you haven't fallen into anything necessarily.
Yes. Yes. And the funny thing happens when it happens in a family. When it happens in a family and you love the members of your immediate family, and the genesis and the actual operation of that love are unconscious, some people fight to keep it unconscious. Even to each other. Not just to outsiders, but to each other. We daren't ever admit that we really love each other. And it's almost the feeling that if this ever escapes the unconscious, it's going to be gone. And that's really a big superstition about love, that it can't bear consciousness. That's the same thing as like saying that a musical prodigy can't learn notes because if they do, they'll lose it. That's a gross superstition. Yeah, but the same phenomenon is there. Yes. Good point. Okay. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.